Hey DCA students, welcome to the recap on Poe. The recap of our discussions and lectures on Edgar Allan Poe's poetry, The Raven and Lenore, and also The Fall of the House of Usher. This moves fast, so you might want to watch it a couple of times. I'm just going to hit the highlights of the things that we discussed that were really important about the poems in the short story. First of all, to take both The Raven and Lenore together as a piece, pay close attention to how Poe uses sounds to help create psychological effects. Remember, we talked about he used sounds, consonant sounds, L's and M's, and vowel sounds, O's, and R's, especially OR combinations, Lenore, nevermore, and how he used dactylic meter, which is the opposite of iambic, or it's different from iambic, that's for sure. And he does this to sort of unnerve the reader, to make you feel sort of uneasy, right? Because he felt that those sounds created psychological effects on the reader. That was quite sophisticated. Now, you might say it's kind of simplistic, but actually I think it's kind of quite sophisticated to think about the sort of subliminal or psychological effect that sounds have on us in setting mood. We do it with music. Why not, right? Why not with words and with syllables and emphases, okay? Also, I want you to think in terms of these not just being two creepy poems about death. I mean, they are, but they're also about something more. They're about something or someone, actually, in both cases, that is lost. What is the effect of loss on our mental and spiritual state? Remember that romantic writers were very interested in sort of the psychological or the psychic, not psychic, but the human psyche, and what makes us operate. You know, the Enlightenment sort of posited this idea that everything about us was rational and logical and almost machine-like. And it's the Romantics who say, very astutely, we're more than that. We're more than just reasoning machines. We're not just computers. We have feelings. We have complex psychological makeup to us. It's quite interesting. What is it about the human condition, the human psyche, the human brain, that is more than just logic and reason? There's a spiritual element to us. There's an emotional element to us. There's a sort of intuitive element to us, right? And this kind of goes along with the fact that both of the poems are easily categorized in the Gothic tradition, and that is that they dabble with the question of whether there's not something out there that's supernatural or extra rational, that means beyond reason, or the inexplicable. And that's what Gothicism sort of wants us to sort of entertain. We like it because it's scary, and we like scary things and creepy things, but there's a more serious agenda here with Gothic literature, and that is, what are the things that are beyond human reason, beyond our comprehension, and how do we respond to that? That's also really important. It's not just, we can't know that, but what do we do about the fact that we can't know certain things, like what happens to you after you die? Speaking of which, let's take a look at The Fall of the House of Usher. There we go. Now it's working. Again, Gothic genre for sure here, okay? The world is only partially knowable. It's interested in the supernatural, in the unintelligible, interested in exploring and plumbing the depths of the human psyche, right? There are things about human behavior and the human psychological condition that are beyond what we know about it, or beyond explanation at this point. We're much more complex than what the Enlightenment would have you believe human beings are. And we see this, of course, in the main characters, Roderick, Madeline, and the narrator, who goes without a name. Know those characters and what's going on. In some ways, Madeline's kind of a character and kind of a not a character. We really don't hear anything from her, obviously. I hate to say she's a stick figure, but she's pretty plain. I mean, we see her, but we don't really hear from her. It's really about the narrator and Roderick. All these dualities exist in the short story, too. Roderick and Madeline, they're twins, of course. They look very much, they're identical twins. So there's a pair there. The house and the family, right? The house of Usher means the family of Usher, but it also means the building. The narrator and Roderick are buddies, pals from way back, and so on. The house and its reflection in the tarn. So there's like pairs of things, dualities, and the house is sort of fractured right down the middle, right? So there's dualities that go on. The diseases seem to be opposite diseases in some respect that Roderick and Madeline suffer from. Roderick is suffers from hypersensory disorder, right? Every sensory thing, every sound, every smell, every light or color, it's just too much. It overwhelms him. Whereas Madeline, gosh, you couldn't wake her up with a stick. With a 2x4. She's catatonic. She's completely oblivious and shut off to all of her senses. So they suffer from opposite diseases. It's really strange. He's getting at something that way. That's not accidental. He's trying to tell us, he being Poe, is trying to tell us something by presenting us with identical twins who suffer completely polar opposite sets of symptoms with their diseases, okay? And then we get into the question of the symbolism involved. The house symbolizes lots of things. The family history, a decline, right? Because their family is in decline. The painting that we are shown, that creepy painting that just kind of goes never-endingly with white walls, and where does the light originate from in that painting? And all of those things. The vault itself that they put Madeline into. The colors, obviously, romantics, they love color symbolism. And the tarn, what is the tarn? Here's a great question we didn't plunge into in class is there's the house, which is physically there, and then there's the reflection of the house, which is in the lake or tarn, right? And so he looks at both, and they both look alike, but there's a difference. Is Poe telling us that the way we understand reality is merely as a reflection, and that what we see isn't the real thing we're looking at, but a reflection? And that's the nature of human existence, that what we see in the Bible, we would say, as the New Testament says, today we look at things through a mirror dimly, but after we die and we go to heaven, we will see things as they really are. I don't think Poe was thinking theologically here, but certainly, what is the difference between what we see and what is real? Okay, is what we see what is real? Because in the story, it looks like she's dead, but then we find out she's not. It looks like she falls on maybe, I don't know. The difference between reality and perception, okay, is the two aren't always the same. Themes that you could look at: the death of the Enlightenment. Remember the poem, The Haunted Palace, seems to be telling us that the old ways of knowing things, the old era known as the Enlightenment by the mid-1800s, early 1800s, has passed away, has gone out of vogue. Is this the death of enlightenment? Remember King Thought? Maybe it's that we're all vulnerable to potentially madness. The narrator comes into the story and he seems like a perfectly sound, reasonable person, but by the time the end of the story, between all the noises and the reading of the mad tryst of Sir Lancelot Canning and everything else, he loses it. He just loses it. Is one of the points of the story that all of us, no matter how sound we are in mental state, are susceptible under the right conditions to losing it. We're more fragile psychologically than we think we are, right? Everybody can be driven to madness if there's enough emphasis on that. I don't know. Maybe that's one of the themes. Are we dealing with an unreliable narrator, right? Poe was fond of using that, unreliable narrator. So you're listening to the narrator and you go, this chap seems to be fully in control. And by the end of the story, you think, you know what? I think I've been listening to a crazy man for the last half hour, right? Because all of a sudden, towards the end of the story, he doesn't seem to be completely there. And he seems to be hinting to us that he's not actually completely all there. Or at least what he's telling us, we sit back and say, no, I can't be that it happened that way, right? I mean, come on, really? But maybe, right? And that's the beauty of Gothic literature and Romantic literature, is that frequently they just love the ambiguity of giving you an ending where you say either the narrator is crazy and was driven crazy, or the narrator is sane and these things really did happen, but they happened supernaturally. Or there's some other explanation, but we're not given that explanation. We have to surmise that or come to the conclusion on our own, okay? So those are the big things that we covered. More than that, obviously, but I'm hitting the highlights, but I want to keep this to 10 minutes. So there's a recap of our Poe material.